Olá e boa noite, eu sou a Diana Souza. Sejam bem-vindos novamente à Road to EuroSteamCon Portugal.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Claudia Silva, and we would like to welcome you again to the Road to EuroSteamCon Portugal.
A EuroSteamCon é uma convenção steampunk que se realiza por toda a Europa e este ano regressa a Portugal nos dias 3 e 4 de outubro, na Casa Barboa, na Vila Nova de Gaia. Para mais informações, consultem o nosso site, cuja morada está por baixo dos nossos nomes, ou contactem-nos via e-mail por steamnorte@gmail.com.
And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, EuroSteamCon is a steampunk convention celebrated all over Europe. This year, it will be finally returning to Portugal on the 3rd and 4th of October in Casa Barboa in Vila Nova de Gaia. If you'd like more information, please check our sites. You can find the address under our names, or contact us by email at steamnorte@gmail.com.
Se quiserem colocar perguntas à nossa convidada, submetam-nas através da página do Hangout ou da página do evento no nosso grupo do Facebook. Como tem vindo a ser tradição, a nossa convidada amavelmente aceitou responder a quaisquer perguntas que possam ter no final da entrevista. Para além disso, este Hangout estará disponível na nossa página do YouTube assim que terminar, primeiro na versão original e assim que possível com legendas em português. Como já vem a ser habitual, depois desta breve introdução, iremos passar exclusivamente para inglês.
If you have any questions, queries, or conundrums that you wish to ask our guest, you may do so via the YouTube channel or the event page on our Facebook. Our guest has kindly agreed to answer any questions you might want to ask her, and will be doing so at the end of the interview. Furthermore, this video will be available on our YouTube page, both in its original version as soon as the Hangout is over, and with the Portuguese subtitles as soon as we can. After the introduction, and to avoid giving our guest a headache, we are going to conduct the interview in English.
E depois da música, regressamos à escrita. Temos connosco Shelley Adina, autora da série best-seller Magnificent Devices, ainda não traduzida em português, e já no seu 8º volume. Ela é também uma professora de escrita, uma galante salvadora de galinhas e uma adepta de moda histórica e vencedora dos prémios Rita e Christie.
After our foray into music, we return to the world of the writer, with Shelley Adina, the Amazon bestseller author of the steampunk series Magnificent Devices, recently releasing its 8th book. She's also a writing teacher, a daring hen rescuer, a lover of historical fashion, and the winner of Rita and Christie Awards. Welcome to the Road to EuroSteamCon, Shelley, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to finally meet you face to face.
Welcome indeed. We are so happy to have you, really. Thank you. And without further ado, let us start with the questions. How were you introduced to steampunk, and what fascinates you most about it?
Well, more years back than I care to remember, when I was a kid in the 60s, there was a show here in the States called Wild Wild West. And in it, 2 Secret Service agents for the government crossed the country on their tricked out train at solving mysteries and protecting the president and all that kind of brave stuff. But what I really liked was that one of them was an inventor. And he was the one who had filled the train with, you know, the pool table that flips upside down and reveals a cannon and things like that. So even as a child, I was into steampunk because that was what that was. And then as I grew up, I fell into costuming. I liked, you know, I would go to Regency dances and make the dresses. And then in the 80s and 90s, when steampunk really began to become a thing, the ideas started to bubble. And then by the time I was ready to write Lady of Devices, the wave had kind of crested, and her timing was perfect.
Okay. But how long, this is not a proper question, but I'm actually curious. How long did you have this whole I want to write steampunk before you decided to go? Like, did you, when you started the show, or just eventually you decided you wanted to write steampunk and you went back to your old love?
Well, in between there was the whole I have to learn to write a book thing. So I went to graduate school in the year 2000, and I learned how to write a book. And my thesis was a romance thesis, which I sold to Harlequin. So after that, there was 7 novels that I did for romance, then I moved into young adult, and then I moved into women's fiction. I had to learn the skills to write a book first, and then when I came back for my MFA, my master's thesis was Lady of Devices. So by that time, I had the skill to build a world and the skill to do characters that people would like, and hopefully, and how to bring a young woman from a place where she has no skills and no abilities to the place by book 8 where other people are depending on her for her skills and abilities and in fact are emulating her. So that took a number of years. We were talking earlier that a book just doesn't come by divine inspiration. You have to learn the skills to bring what's in your head onto the page and then transfer from the page into someone else's head. It's kind of a miracle.
No, me and Dan and Shelley, just before the hangout began, we were chatting about writing and writers and all in general, and it really is something that I never, well, we couldn't do in Portugal. It's the whole writing a book as a master thesis. That would be awesome. I really wish I could do it here, but
True.
No. Yeah, okay. Right, and before I lose myself and Diana smacks me for derailing because my train of thought does tend to run off tracks and chase people upstairs and all that. I will try to behave and ask the next question, which actually is connected to the Magnificent Devices series, which is, for those who might not know the Magnificent Devices series, can you tell us what it's about, other than just steampunk?
Well, what it is about is a young lady from a wealthy family. Her father bets the estate on the combustion engine, which, as everyone knows, is a failure. So he loses everything, and she is cast out onto the streets. And through the skills that have not served her well up until now, like blowing things up, she becomes part of a gang in the London underworld and, in fact, becomes the leader of that gang. And her adventures continue from there. They go to the Texican territories in an airship. They go to the far north in an airship. They come back. They go to Italy, and which is a giant clockwork invented by Leonardo da Vinci, and all the neighborhoods move and circulate around one another to keep the Doge from being found by his assassins. So the series is worldwide almost. And in the next books, I plan to go back to what I'm calling the Royal Kingdom of Spain and the Californias, because a young lady has to stop the war that her father has begun. So that will be like a sub-series in the main Magnificent Devices series.
All right. By the way, did you start with a generic idea and wrote the adventures that crossed your mind, or did you start to write with a clear plan for Claire's story?
I only started with one book. My books usually start with what I call a flash. So the first flash I saw was a young lady blowing up the home economics lab. It was supposed to be chemistry of cookery or something, chemistry of the home, and she makes an explosion and there's chemicals all over everybody. So that was the first flash. And then the second flash was a young woman driving a steam-powered vehicle in Whitechapel in London, which, as everyone knows, at that time Jack the Ripper was tearing up London, and it was a very dangerous place for a young woman alone to be. And so I thought, how did that young woman get from blowing up the chemistry lab, the home ec lab, to being in Whitechapel and being set upon by thieves? And between those 2 points, the story came about. And I sent it off to 10 publishers, or my agent did, and nobody wanted it. The people who did want it said, we don't know how to market this book. And I'm like, wow, could I tell you a thing or two? I know how to market it. So they all turned it down, and I said to my agent, I think I'm just going to put this out myself, because it was 2011 and self-publishing was becoming huge. And she said, go ahead. And so I did. And by the third book, people were starting to get interested and buy more of them. And And the adventures just seem to come organically. Normally, I'm a very careful plotter and planner. I will plan each individual book, but the whole series as a whole, seemed to move kind of organically from continent to continent, and the things that my characters needed to learn could be provided by the events of the adventures. But it was a very creative sort of ongoing process that I haven't really experienced before. I think I was just meant to write these books, and Brain has been waiting for a long time to write them. So there was all that material that was just ready for me.
And that first book was your thesis book, right?
Yes, it was my MFA, Master of Fine Arts thesis. I passed.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Because I do remember that, as you can see, here's my copy of it. I did have the book for a long time, because I actually saw it. It was part of an offer. Try the first one and be engaged. And I really remember reading about it and wanting to get it and get the series because it seems so interesting. So to me, it's kind of weird. Like, steampunk in 2011 was already a big thing, so I'm kind of surprised at your publishers not knowing how to market it.
It's a mystery to me too. Because then, by then, Sherry Priest she had come out with her Bone Shaker series, and other series like Gail Carriger's series were doing very well. It's like, what is going on that the ball is being dropped? But in the end, it turned out to be great for me because I had control of covers, I have control of content, and it makes it more fun because no one is telling me how I have to do it. I love hearing from readers because they're full of ideas of what they think will happen, and I'm able to surprise them.
And the covers are amazing. I suppose you couldn't have such covers if you published through a traditional publisher. These covers really are amazing, and it was what first called me to the series. How colorful and beautiful the covers looked, and then I saw it was steampunk, so it was perfect, really.
Yes, Diana,
sorry. That was really important to me, that the covers would be something that people wanted on their bookshelves. And the artist, her name is Claudia McKinney, and she is at fatpuppyart.com, P-H-A-T. She is an amazing digital artist, and so she does the art. After book 3, she was doing custom art for me. Before that, I was using some of her stock. But that original image on Lady of Devices it was like, wow, that's it. That's the spirit that I want, the sort of magical feeling with the bright colors. And yes, some people don't like the makeup and stuff on them, but I think it's distinctive enough that it kind of sets the series apart. It's not just, brown.
True. Here is the cover for people wondering.
Yes, and for those intending on coming to EuroSteamCon, we will be giving this book with the lovely bookmarks that come with it, and signed gently by Shelley
Adina?
Not Cheryl Priest, so sorry. For some reason I have her on my mind. By Shelley Adina. So yes, do come to us. We have lots of presents to give you when we have the event. And I'm sorry, I'm diverting myself again. I'm very, very sorry. I'll be punished horribly afterwards.
No.
Chocolate for you.
All the chocolate is for me now.
Oh, no. Right. Still on the Magnificent Devices series. Obviously, this is set in a period that, even though it's imaginary, it's ground very firmly on a period that existed. I do remember I really liked how you introduced the wit and the bloods, which was a very interesting twist. And even though I do think it's completely originally yours, it still resounds as being very truthful, very realistic. It sounds as if it could actually happen. So my question is, just how much historic research and world building went into writing this series?
A lot. I've been to London once or twice just for this series. I've been to London before, but just for this series, I would go over, and if I had said in a passage that Claire walked from the embankment to Belgravia, I walked that route because I wanted to know how long it took. You know, was it uphill? What would she have seen? Those kinds of realistic things. The cottage in Vauxhall Gardens, it's now the Vauxhall Bridge, but it wasn't called the Vauxhall Bridge in 1889. So things, I want to ground readers in things that are as real as possible, so that if they ever did go to London, they could say, oh, that's that bridge that was called such and such when, you know, Lady Claire was walking across it. But at the same time, there are things I've changed deliberately. For instance, Prince Albert is still alive and well, even in 1895, because I didn't want him to die. He is one of the premier engineers in my world, and it's not fair that he catches a cold and dies. So, and yes, I've gotten a little criticism. Oh, don't they know? Doesn't she know that Prince Albert died in 18 whatever? And I'm like, but this is my world. I get to write the rules. And if I need the Prince of the Realm to be an engineer, he's going to be, because that could be, you know, that could have an effect on my characters. So things like that, things like the cable car system in Munich. Yes, they have a very, very efficient underground system, but what if the combustion engine was a failure and they had to reconstruct it as cable cars? So I have my characters riding on cable cars in Munich, where that run on cables underground that don't actually exist that way. So it was fun to make an interesting mix of the real and the imagined, but anything that's real is very carefully researched.
Just because it's, as I said, it's one of my favorite parts, would you very quickly explain to our viewers what are the wits and the bloods and how they came to be in the Society of London?
Okay, well, the bloods are those who would be like the peerage nowadays. They're people who are titled, who are landed, who have privileges that average people don't have. And they're the ones that think that because they have this hereditary privilege, they should be running the government and all the institutions that make my steampunk Britain what it is. Or, yeah, Britain, England. But the wits are the engineering class. They're the brains, the intellectuals, the people who have salons and come together and discuss ideas the way they actually did in the 1800s and in the 1700s. So I see this kind of as an offshoot that would have begun in like the Age of Enlightenment in the 1700s and moved forward in time to Victoria's age, where now the people who are making the money are the ones who are the engineering and intellectuals, and they don't like the way the bloods have been running the show so far. So there's a lot of political conflict. When a wit prime minister is elected, there is funding for research and funding for technology, and when there's a blood prime minister elected, things kind of regress and become a little more Luddite. So I haven't really touched on it a whole lot, but there is kind of a cultural difference between, like for Lady Claire, it would be conflict. She was brought up as a blood. She's landed, her father has property down in Cornwall, but she is a wit in her heart. And so there's a little bit of family conflict because her mother just completely does not understand her, which, you know, might be normal for the mother of a 17-year-old, but at the same time, Claire is a wit, her family is a blood, and there's conflict, especially if the series progresses a couple of years down the road. Her little brother, the heir to the estate, is being brought up as a blood, and how will that conflict affect their relationship as brother and sister? So it's interesting to think about. I mean, people have enough conflict to deal with as it is, but when you're building a world and writing a story, even the political institutions and the way your world's government runs has to be thought about a little bit to make it convincing. And clearly, if you guys have picked it up and it seems to be working, then that makes me happy.
Speaking of Lady Claire being brought up as a blood, you write a lot of independent female characters, let's say ladies of spirit. But,
Yes.
and some people might consider that historically inaccurate, although they would be wrong, of course. No? But what have some of your readers spoken to you about that? What are your thoughts on that? Have you encountered conflict with your lady player?
I think people, when they see steampunk, one of the tropes of the genre is the independent female. So that actually is why I'm not writing historical fiction. I tried to write a Regency, and it was a dismal failure because I couldn't figure out how she lit the lamp. Like, did they have matches back then? What did they do? I have since found out, but in the meantime, that poor story is under my bed because I couldn't figure out how she lit the lamp. So in steampunk, the characters can be constructed so that they reflect the punk part of steampunk, that subversive element that's necessary in the fiction, and so that's why my heroines are the way they are. They live within their world, but at the same time they're a little bit out of their world. They're a little bit out of step. Lady Claire is certainly out of step with school and family and expectations because she wants to be an engineer. And at that time in my world, there were female engineers, but they weren't really accepted all that much. In Her Own Devices, the doctor, Rosemary Craig, was actually imprisoned in Bedlam as a madwoman because she was a threat to the London Power Company. The device that she had invented would have put them out of business. So instead of working with her and giving her royalties on her device, they put her in Bedlam.
Yeah. That seems reasonable.
Right. Well, if you're a blood, you probably would think that way. But so there's definitely social conflict going on there, but at the same time, you can't really have a series with interesting female characters if they're all sitting at home embroidering cushions. So my characters come into their strength, they learn it. They may have the beginnings of it in the beginning, but it's something that the events of the story and their own desires create so that they become well-rounded women, as do most of us. It's what we want in our beginnings that create the strong women that we are, so it seemed reasonable to reflect that in the fiction.
True, very true.
I'm going to go a bit back because I am both interested in the series and your method. And first, my question actually two ways. First, which kind of sources do you look for to do the world building and create this very verisimilar, very truth-sounding world? And how long do you spend creating the world and doing research before you start writing? Do you do it like you did it at the start of the series and then you just use it, or you do every time you write a book of the series?
It depends. Well, since the settings are so varied, from the Texican territories to the far north to Venice. I went to Venice last fall and I researched locations where Yeah. Well, I was at the Women's Fiction Festival in Matera in Italy, which happens every September. So it was very close to go to Venice and walk around and again, feet on the ground kind of research, which is how I work. Even in my Amish fiction under my other pen name, Adina Senft, I go to Amish country and I walk around and I smell the air and I look at the flowers, I see what's growing, I see what people are wearing. Since I'm a costumer, what people wear is very important to me. As you may have noticed in the Devices books, lots of lovely descriptions of costumes.
I approve of it wholeheartedly.
So, Claudia, you might be interested in the Women's Fiction Festival. There's a lot of craft and industry information to be had there. It's in September.
Well, I'll take it. I didn't even know it existed, truth be told, but learn something new every day.
It's a great conference. I've been there twice now. So anyway, as far as world building, I've forgotten the question. Whether I research book by book. It depends on what the book needs. Like, for instance, the Weird West books that are coming up. I just got back from a road trip in the American Southwest looking for locations to set pivotal moments of the books. And there's a location called Antelope Canyon, which is like a crack in the ground, but when you descend into it, it's like this fantasy world that made of stone that completely disorients you and makes you think that you might even be on a drug trip. So I was thinking, what if my character, Gloria Merriweather Astor, needed to hide from being pursued, and she dove into this crack in the ground and found this place. And so I'm thinking, okay, there's a good scene that I could probably write there. So my personal philosophy of creating a world is to experience as much of it as I can in real life. And then for the parts that I can't experience, Google Earth is a wonderful thing.
All hail
I spend lots of time on Google Earth. For instance, when in her own devices, when that character, Rosemary Craig, was in Bedlam, Lady Claire goes to visit her to get information about the device. Well, how can I describe that experience if I've never been there? Because at that point I hadn't been. I used Google Earth to fly over the property, which it's now the Naval Museum, but it hasn't changed since the 1800s, the property. So there was a wall at the back where my characters could escape over. There was a barred gate. There was a garden where Lady Claire could talk with the scientist. Everything I needed to write that scene was in Google Earth. And then the following year when I went to London, and I went there, and lo and behold, everything that I had described inside and out was as it would have been. In fact, the ward that they put the insane women in is now the cafeteria. That's a little weird. But I could actually walk up to it and see, okay, there's this much space, and how many beds could I fit in here? And it was a really interesting experience. So a lot of it is on the ground, but for what I can't be on the ground for, there's Google Earth, there's books, there's Michelin maps are very useful. I have a big map of London, because the streets in London really haven't changed since the 1800s. They've gotten wider, but their location hasn't really changed. So that's been very useful as well.
Creative. On the matter of creative and strange resources to write, me and Diana and the rest of the court know very well about. We know you used NaNoWriMo in the past. The group, as I said, the group that is now organizing EuroSteamCon, the Court du Norte, we all met through NaNoWriMo. Now the thing is, what actually made you decide to one day just go and write a novel in a month? What just made you go, okay, today I'm going to participate in a crazy month of full-on writing?
Well, oddly enough, my writing process is to write 1,000 words a day. So to kick it up a bit and write 1,667 words a day wasn't that much of a stretch. Mind you, I've never actually achieved 50,000. I think the most I ever got to was 40,000. But my usual monthly output is about 30,000 words. So
nice.
It wasn't that much of a stretch to join Nano, and I love the community. I love the way you can have people in your little group, and you can, talk with one another and agree to meet at coffee shops and have write-ins and things like that. That's the community of writers is the real phenomenon behind NaNoWriMo. It's not that somebody can write 50,000 words in a month, because many can, but the community and the friends you find as you've experienced yourselves.
Yep,
that's
it's true.
It's true. Yeah, I like that about Nano, and I think that's why I like to participate, is because it brings my little community back together again.
Are you planning on participating again, maybe this year?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I have the month of November blocked out for Nano.
We all do.
I'm going to assume that your techniques to write during NaNoWriMo are pretty much like our own, which is write no matter what, even if you're falling asleep. And yes, there is a story that happens to be true where I fell asleep and woke up to a newly written paragraph that, of course, made no sense whatsoever. It had words, but it has no. So I'm going to assume that in Nano, your technique is different. But how do you usually write? What are your methods as a writer? Normally, other than 1,000 words a day? Normally,
I'm an outliner, so I plan the book ahead of time. I have my friends and I, we went while we were in Italy at the Matera Women's Fiction Festival. We developed this, you know, daily writing routine, and we went to a cafe that had these wonderful gold paper placemats. And we found ourselves having a plotting party on the placemats. And so one of my friends went into the kitchen and got a whole bunch of them. And so now I use these lovely gold placemats to plot my story out, because I draw pictures, I draw, you know, character family trees, and I have a column of what I know. And that's sort of just the maybe the top 5 points that I know are going to happen in this story. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but they're in the what I know column. And then I use Blake Snyder's Save the Cat beat sheets to plot the book. It's very simple, and it's for movies, but hey, it works for me, so I use it. So between the what I know and Blake Snyder's beat sheet, I can outline the story before I begin. And then I have the flash that is the opening scene, and once I have that, I'm good to go. I don't need to look at the outline again, but it's in my brain somewhere, and it guides me all the way through to the end. So in the daily course of my working, I'm also a copy editor for independent authors. In fact, I just finished a book for Bella Andre. So I do the editing in the morning, then I let the chickens out at lunch for an hour, and then the afternoon is my writing time, because biologically that just seems to be my circadian rhythm, is to work in the early afternoon for the creative stuff. So from 1 till 4, I write, and if I come up with my word count, that's great. If I don't, I keep going. Sometimes that means even into the night, but usually, because that rhythm is the way it is, I can get it done by 4 o'clock. Then I let the chickens out again, and then my husband and I have dinner, and in the evening I watch, you know, Supernatural and Cold Dark and Masterpiece Theater.
Do you have a specific place where you write, like your office? Because I know many writers like to go to the garden or go to a coffee shop and write in very different places, or their muse keeps working. Do you always write in the same place?
Well, Bella Andre taught me a thing or two about feng shui for the writer. And the creative portion of the house, as you walk in the front door, look to the right in the middle of the house, and that is the creative quadrant. So I find, maybe it's the power of suggestion, I don't know, most of my writing happens on the south side of the house in that quadrant. So even whether it's inside on the couch on a rainy day with the fire going, or outside with the chickens, I take my computer outside and I work out there, and it's always on the south side of the house in that area. My office is on the north side of the house, and so it doesn't get natural daylight. And I seem to need natural daylight in order to write. So I go on the south side of the house. So it's kind of weird, but it at the same time as my natural rhythms for writing, that's where the sun is. So I think maybe they're tied together.
Makes sense.
What was the strangest place you've ever written in?
Ooh, strangest. Well, my favorite place was that cafe in Venice. Strangest place.
We ask because there is an ongoing competition in the group of writers from our city, which is at the end of the month, the person who wrote things in a strange place, the strangest place wins. And I had for a year had a very good shot, because I was writing inside a linen closet once, because my cleaning lady was there, and the entire house was the floor being repaired, and the only place I could stand was inside my closet. So I was writing in the closet. But then one of the other girls won, because she apparently had been writing during a treatment of a horse. She was a veterinary student, and she actually managed to write during a surgical procedure, so she kind of won the prize. That's why I'm now asking you, strangest place you've ever written in.
That would win the prize, all right. I don't really. A memorable place was on the top of a red rock cliff in Utah, where I was looking out over a canyon and writing, but I don't think it was strange. I think I was just looking for the atmosphere of the place.
Totally counts. Yeah, totally. Diana, do you agree?
It counts. It does.
On the edge of a cliff?
Yes.
Yes.
But now
the veterinary one, that takes the cake.
yes.
It does.
But this whole thing about the writing, I actually meant to ask, is what any of the Magnificent Devices books written during NaNoWriMo, or is just how several authors do you use NaNoWriMo for your first draft for most of your books?
I actually, since NaNoWriMo has now expanded to, I think, April and July and November, that actually coordinates very well with my writing schedule. So I find I may not make the word count, the whole 50,000, but for first drafting with groups of people who are also doing the same thing, I find the community really useful, and there's something about it that helps me because, of course, we're all holding each other accountable, and we're counting our word counts, and you can see people's counts going up and down, and the element of competition kind of comes into it, and you want to be the one with the first. So I'm a Leo, so that tends to happen. So I think it can be very useful for first drafting. Mind you, you wouldn't want to schedule your books just because of Nano, but I think if it happens to fall while you're writing, why not use the energy? Why not use the help of your friends? Just be prepared beforehand. That's the most important thing, I think, so you can use the time wisely.
You mentioned you're a plotter, like me. Yay, plotters. Have you actually ever tried to pants? To write, improvise, and how bad was it?
Oh, that's hard. I can't do it. I write myself into a corner, and I cannot figure out how to get them out of this problem. And see, if you do that at the outline level, it's not quite so painful to scrub out a line and do something else. But when you're 50 pages in and everything has led up to this point that you can't extricate them from, deleting 50 pages, I can't even imagine the pain that would be.
I used to think I was a pantser, but now I'm starting to realize I need to have at least a general outline, or else I'll panic and I will never write anything.
Well, and at least to know the high points, at least to know where it's going and how it resolves. If I didn't know that, I completely fail.
Precisely, that's it. Speaking of future plans, and NaNoWriMo is more or less approaching, what are your future plans for the Magnificent Device series?
Oh boy, I was happy you asked. Right now I've just started a Christmas novella, which I believe is to be in a steampunk anthology that will come out, I hope, in October. So there's that possibility. So I'm just in case the anthology does happen, I'm writing it now. As soon as that is done, in September I'll start this would be book 9. So September would be book 10. Either 2 or 3 of Gloria Merriweather Astor's adventures in the Weird West. It's going to take more than one book, I think, to stop the war that her father started. So I think at least 2 books, possibly 3. And then after that, I don't know. It depends on what readers want me to do, I think. Because I certainly have the ideas, and if people want to read them, I'll just keep writing them.
Actually, this is a personal question I wanted to make. Have you thought about writing with Peony Churchill? Because I loved her, and she showed up so little, and I wanted more of her.
As a matter of fact, yes. She is on the schedule for her own book. I just have to figure out when in the timeline of the other books it would happen and what would be, because she seems like a very together girl. So it would be something where either she faces a great loss and has to recover, or she's given some kind of moral task that she has to overcome. And the idea for the Flash hasn't happened yet. So until it does, she's just waiting.
But it's still good news.
Yeah, so I definitely have a plan for her, but the brain hasn't told me what it is yet.
All right.
But so you don't have already completely planned how the story is going to end. You'll just keep going as the inspiration comes along. So you can keep having them.
In a way, I have a general idea of where. So I knew that the 8 books would be Lady Claire and the Mopsies. So those are now completed. And the next books will be Gloria. I know there's going to be at least 2 for Gloria. And after that, it kind of, as you write through a story, things happen. Seeds are planted in the narrative that you might not know what that means yet. But by the time you get 4 books down the line, you're like, oh, that's what that's about. Gloria Merriweather Astor was never meant to reappear. She was meant to be a mean girl in book 1, and that was her function. And then, lo and behold, she turns up with her father in Brilliant Devices, book 4. And over the course of the next 4 books after that, I realized that the big bad in the universe that I've invented is her dad. And he is causing all these bad things to happen because he is a warmonger. He's an arms dealer. And so I guess that says a little bit about my personal philosophy about arms dealers. But it's the realization that he has been causing this behind the scenes all along was kind of like a, wow, Brain did that and I wasn't even aware of it.
Brains are silly and amazing.
They are silly and amazing, and they do things when you're not expecting it.
Exactly. How dare them.
But I think that's the great thing about the creative process, that we're not locked in. Like people say, oh, outliners, they're all locked into what they do. They lose their creativity. I'm like, I don't think so.
Nope. Not at all.
And now that everyone's basically seems to be very fashionable to explore your world in different media, do you actually have any sort of media you'd like to see Magnificent Devices explored in? Ideally, what would it be? Who would it playing? Who the organizer?
Oh, my dreams, I tell you. I actually, this summer, a screenwriter and I entered the Lady of Devices, the first couple of books, in what is called the MacGyver contest. So you may not have remembered the TV show MacGyver from several years ago. Yep. Well, there's a foundation now built around the people who ran that show, supporting girls becoming engineers in high school and university.
Oh,
and so
nice.
They were having a contest. If you had a book with a female engineer who was young, like high school age, who was aspiring to be an engineer, they would make it possible for you to make a TV show out of it. And so, of course, I entered.
Of course.
My screenwriting friend is like, okay, this is a no-brainer. We have to do this. Sadly, we didn't make the top 12.
Oh.
It was worth trying, you know, because it would have been perfect. So ideally, you know, outside of that, ideally, I would love a graphic novel made of the series, or a series of graphic novels. That, it seems to me that that would lend itself really well to the world and the characters. I don't think it will ever have a movie made out of it because it's so expensive. I mean, how do you'd have to do CGI for airships and steam landaus and things like that because they don't exist. Well, airships exist in Germany. But so there are things that are reasonable to hope for, like graphic novels. There are things that are not so reasonable to hope for, like movies. So I keep my expectations kind of in the reasonable area because then I can be really happy when it happens.
Have you ever thought about making a Kickstarter campaign for a graphic novel, for example?
I have thought of it, but I would need to hire someone to manage that because there just is no time. I'm in the middle of the audiobooks right now, and I'm having the books translated into German, and so the management of those two lines of business is quite time-consuming, plus the writing, plus the editing, plus school. It's like,
plus the chickens.
The chickens keep me sane, believe me.
There are no cats today here, viewers, but we do have chickens.
Yes. I can go get one.
I think we can start
Yeah,
making...
yes. We had originally a few more questions, but thanks to my usual, let's talk about something else, we are running behind schedule, and we know better than to refuse our audience the chance to talk to you. So, because I am quite fond of my neck, thank you. So I think it's
I
time...
don't bite necks.
No, but I'm actually sure the viewers will try to stab me because once again I made us run late. So I think it's time for the questions of the viewers. Diana, if you please.
All right, let's see. Rafaela is asking, I'd really like to know this. Who's your favorite character in the series?
Oh, you would ask me that, Rafaela.
Of course.
Bad Rafaela.
Well, I think, of course, my favorite is Lady Claire because I know her so well. And my second favorite is probably Alice Chalmers because there's a lot about her that has been me in the past. She's very unsure of her background and unsure if people will accept her. And I think that's almost one of the reasons that I began to write, is because I could make characters who were accepted and who were respected for what they did. And because of those characters, I have in turn become, in a measure, respected for what I do. So Alice is kind of special to me just because she represents what I was.
Makes sense, it does. I like Alice too. And Lady Claire, of course.
Lady Claire.
Right, so Anna wants to know if have you ever thought about leaving steampunk to more popular genres? Well, you have done romance, as far as I know, so...
Right, I have one romance novel up and several out with Harlequin as under a different name. I actually have, don't laugh, a Mennonite vampire series that has one book in it called Immortal Faith, and I have two more planned for that series. There's going to be a Fallen Angel and a Nest of Demons in the Old Order Mennonite community in Pennsylvania. And I really like those books. They're a little more, I don't want to say literary because that's not really appropriate in that genre, but they're a little more thoughtful and less adventure, but there's still the whole adventure of, conquering the demons or whatever. But the girls who do it are Mennonite girls, and they are very, very different from the steampunk heroine. True. So I'm quite excited about how a Mennonite girl who is brought up to be self-effacing and humble and submissive, how she can come into her own and save her community from disaster. So that's a very interesting dynamic for me to explore, and I'm looking forward to doing more of it. But there is the one book out already.
I think that's very interesting perspective, because you don't see a lot of diversity in terms of religion in books nowadays, and I think it's very good and interesting to see different points of view in a lot of different genres in books.
I agree, and I grew up plain, very similar to Mennonite and Amish. We didn't have to dress the way they do, but the doctrines are the same, and so exploring that, a woman's mindset brought up in that closed culture, is interesting to me, especially when you're fighting vampires.
I agree, because we need diversity across all genres of books and all categories, I think.
Right, so my turn, yay. Anna, this is another Anna. We seem to have a bunch of Annas today.
Hi, Anna.
What are your influences in terms of books, movies, and TV shows?
Oh, where do I start? I think my earliest influence as a child was an English writer called Elizabeth Goudge. And I think what I like about her books the most is, A, they were young female characters who had agency in their own story, and her world building, it was almost like they were historicals, but there was a touch of magical realism in each book, and I think that was what hooked me as a child, that the world could be a bigger place than the one that I saw. And, you know, for we writers, that discovery is like an eye-opener. It's like, ooh, I can make this, and I can do it with words and pages, and that's really exciting. So she, I think, was my earliest influence. Laverle Spencer was a huge influence in the 80s because of the courtship story. She wrote beautiful courtship stories, and of course there's one in every book I write, I think. But she was a very heavy influence there. And then lately, my influences, I like Gail Carriger's wit. I like Jerry Priest's inventiveness. I like Jim Butcher just because he's amazing. I like Kristen Hanna because of the depth of her characterization. She's one of my writing idols. And as far as things, pop culture things that I'm into, I've been watching Supernatural since the beginning. I love that show, although it's gotten a little weird lately.
It has.
Why they killed Charlie, I'm still not happy about it.
Agree. I agree.
What else do I watch? I watch lots of Masterpiece Theater, mostly because I like mysteries. I read mysteries, the puzzle, figuring out the puzzle. People say, oh, you're such a complicated plotter. And I think it's because I read mysteries, because they're complicated plots, but they're always based in reality, based in fact, and the human mind can figure them out, kind of how we are when we're plotting. It's like untangling a mystery, getting to the end of the story. So I think that's why I like those. So in a nutshell, I think those are my greatest influences.
They are good influences. All right. Kristin asks, what are the commonalities between your steampunk and Amish novels?
Oh, I think I know who this Kristin is.
Kristin Rose.
Oh, yes. She is in the Master of Fine Arts in Writing Popular Fiction program, where I teach. And she's writing a steampunk novel.
Very well done, Kristin.
I think the commonalities, sort of the most obvious ones, are the woman creating her own life out of what she has. Because in the Amish community, the story is written on a very small scale. Like your whole story might just take place in a square mile. And so the women, within the doctrine, within the strictures of the Ordnung, or the dictates of the culture, can create a life that is beautiful and creative. So in steampunk as well, I think that's what I'm doing with these female characters. What they have to work with is their own brains and their willingness to take a risk and the love that they have for the people that they care about, what I call the flock. I kind of look on my readers as the flock, too. We're all just a big flock. So I think the commonalities are what women create with the materials they have on hand to make a happy life, to give them what they need to have a happy life. And also, my students, I teach them in one of my classes that everyone has a core story. My core story, which I write in book after book, no matter what genre it is the woman breaking out of the cage that outside society has placed on her. So Lady Claire, of course, does it. I have a series coming up called, it's contemporary women's fiction called the Smoke River series, and it's about women breaking out of a religious structure. The Amish, they may not break out of their structure, but they find ways to satisfy their own need for growth and creativity within the structure, and that growth and creativity kind of leaks out between the bars and is noticeable in the outside world. So I think those are the biggest commonalities I see in all the kinds of fiction that I write. Thank you, Kristin.
This one is from Philippa. How long do you think you'll be writing for the Magnificent Devices? Or at least how many books until you think it's all written, I have nothing left to say, explore?
Oh no, you're going to make me put a timeline on this.
No, you can say forever.
I could say forever. Well, I can tell you what I know for sure. I know there's the Christmas novella. I know there's 2 books for Gloria. I know there's a book for Peony Churchill. So that takes us to what, number 12, 13? And after that, Brain hasn't told me what's happening after that. When Brain lets me know, I'll let you know.
All right, Philippa, we'll let you know. Inês wants to know, what is your favorite steampunk gadget? Goggles?
Yes, must have goggles. I like gadgets. I have, it looks like a watch, but it's
is it a bomb?
No, it's not a bomb. It's a temporal decay monitor.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I wear it on my costume, and it keeps time, and that, I think, is my favorite gadget, just because who would call a watch a temporal decay monitor? But I think I actually made that up, or maybe it says it on it. Anyway, it's a very cool little gadget, and I like it.
I bet it's a bomb. It's a bomb, isn't it? That's where you got your idea for the book.
Oh, that rascal Lizzie. The audio, but my narrator, Fiona Hardingham, she just narrated that scene in A Lady of Resources, and she did it so well. It was so exciting. I could hardly remember that I was supposed to be looking for errors.
And okay, this time we have a third Anna, surprisingly. Anna Raffaella wants to know, I have a question, since I have only recently started reading the books. I have seen them shelved as young adult, but the tone feels different to me compared to other young adults I've read. How do you feel about this? Do you consider your series young adult?
In a way, I do. Well, just in completely logistical terms, at the beginning of the series, Lady Claire is 17, and technically the booksellers look at that as young adult. But then she progresses, so that's the first 4 books. She's 17, she turns 18 in the 4th one. The next 4 books moves forward 5 years, and by then she's 23. So it's no longer really young adult, but the Mopsies are 16, and they have their 2 stories. So I'm not sure that I would classify them young adult if I had to do it over again, but in order for people to find stories like that for young readers, because I find that mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers share the books with the younger people in their lives, and so I don't want to lock them out of that, which is why they're shelved with young adult. Myself, I think they're action and adventure, and they're categorized as family. So there's only a teensy little bit of bad language. I think somebody says damn once. There's no sex, but there is kissing. So they can be classified as family, and that broadens the readership so that more people can enjoy them and share them with each other.
Yeah, I agree. They have a lot of new categories now. There's new adult too, but that's different. That's mostly in college, university. But I can see the Magnificent Devices in YA, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it on adult or family, like you suggested, or simply in adventure and steampunk. Unfortunately, there are no steampunk bookshelves, as far as I know, in stores.
In England,
it falls under science fiction. It has its own category in the science fiction list on Amazon. So that's the primary category that it lives in, and then young adult is a secondary category.
Actually, that reminds me of a question we've made. Do you think steampunk should be science fiction? Should it be fantasy? Or should it be a genre all of its own?
Oh, that's a hard question.
It is.
I think the reason they have it in science fiction is the same reason that they have stories with rockets in science fiction. It's the technology. But myself, that technology has been imagined. It's not real. And often the locations and the adventures and the sort of magical, fantastic things that happen would be appropriate in fantasy. So I actually have them tagged to be in both places, science fiction, steampunk, and fantasy historical.
Oh, okay.
Makes sense, right?
Steampunk everywhere. Yes, steampunk everywhere. I totally agree.
I agree too.
On a related note, Mariana wants to know, actually asks you, please tell us something about your chickens.
Everyone wants to know about the chickens.
Do you have another hour? I about 10 years ago, a little red hen walked into our yard and started laying eggs under the fence. And we built her a coop, and she got depressed because chickens are flock animals. So she had to have a companion. So I went down to the animal shelter, and there was a little bird sitting in a cage looking like this. So depressed because she didn't have a flock either. So then I put the two together in our little coop, and they were happy. And that was the beginning of rescue. I've been doing rescue for 10 years, and it's amazing. I live in Silicon Valley. It's amazing how many chickens need to be rescued in Silicon Valley. I came out one Saturday morning, and there was a cardboard box on the front porch with a chicken in it. No note. I felt like the fire department finding a baby on the front step. So the word gets out, and there are actually quite a number of chicken owner groups in various cities, and we communicate with one another, and we help with rescue. So that's all. My girls are rescued. They're all voice trained. They all know their names. They come when they're called. Chickens are very smart. They have the intellect of an 18-month-old child, so you can teach them language.
That's amazing.
Yeah. They're not just food.
But it's interesting because it's not very usual to see chickens here as pets, as companions. It's not very usual, but it's interesting. And reading the books, I found it really interesting and amazing animals.
The things that I put into the books are things that I've actually experienced. The birds ride around on my shoulder. They want their snuggle at night. They communicate. Like if they want to be picked up and held, they'll come up and they'll pull on my pant leg or peck my sock to say, you know, pick us up. We want to snuggle. They're very good at communicating, and it's kind of endearing. And they're a bit like cats. They like lots of attention.
Yes, cats do like attention. Here's another question, going back a bit to the gadgets. What is the favorite gadget you've written about in the series?
Oh my.
From those you probably invented? You know, there are several ones.
There are several ones, yeah. I think my all-time favorite is Venice, moving on a giant clockwork.
Well, yes.
That's quite a gadget.
True.
But I loved inventing that, just the look of it. I could see it like it was on a film screen, these huge arms coming up from this gearworks on the seabed. And so I was on the docks in Venice looking into the water going, okay, how deep is this, and how will the arms look, and can we fit submarines in here, and maybe I should make the lagoon deeper. It was just really fun to imagine, and the reason, the church bells ring is so that the bridges can all go up, so that the islands can move, and then the bridges come down, and the siren goes off, and you can move about your business. That was really fun to invent. That's my favorite.
Okay,
it's a great one.
Yep. We all love gadgets. We all love costumes. Are both things that are awesome in steampunk, among others. So that actually connects to our next question from Victoria. She asks, you make amazing descriptions of costumes and outfits in your series. Will we ever see an illustrated book for the costumes that the characters wear in the Magnificent Devices series?
What a good idea! Victoria,
Still the idea.
I never thought of it, because I do little sketches for myself so I don't forget from page to page what things look like. But oh my, that is a really... Okay, now you've got me thinking.
That's
a good idea. Or even putting drawings on my blog so that people can see what the outfits are. In fact, I got a question from a young man one time. What's her raiding rig? What does that look like? And so I described it for him, but I think it probably would have been easier if I just drawn a picture. As soon as I learn, I'm learning how to do a little bit of art. So I'm learning a little bit of manga and a little bit of watercolor. So as soon as I figure this out, I'm gonna post drawings of the costumes. Thank you. That was a good idea.
Count me in as first to buy the book, because I do love fashion books, especially
Yes.
Victorian era. So would sound really good. So please, if it can happen, make it happen. I'll be first in line to buy it.
We could almost do like how to put together this costume. Here's the pattern you would use for the skirt. Here's the resources for the top. You know, here's how you would make a hat. Ooh, this could be something.
It could be, because we love to do cosplay, and we are going to do cosplay on our convention. So you know, it's part of our community, and we love to make our own clothes. And a book like that and images like that would be amazing.
That would be fun.
Oh yes.
I have a friend named Alita Pardalis, and she is the most amazing costumer you ever saw. I love going to her Facebook page just to look at her dresses. She'll do like the steampunk Rowena Ravenclaw. It's just like, oh, so beautiful. How do you do that?
I'd buy that. I'd probably buy that because I'm a Ravenclaw, you know. So.
Right, I'm a Ravenclaw too.
Ravenclaws for the win.
I'm not.
Claudia is a Slytherin.
No.
I'm not evil. I'm just morally flexible.
Morally flexible.
Well, let's see if we have more questions.
Yes, from Rafaela. I was fascinated by this idea, writing a novel as a thesis. Can you imagine it? Brilliant. What goes into writing a novel as a thesis that's different from writing a novel or writing a thesis? Or is it just writing a novel and hand it to people?
Well, first you have to get your thesis advisor's approval. So what that involves is you do the first 3 chapters and the outline, and they look at it and say, okay, does this have the structure, the bones and ribs, the possibility of actually making it to the end, which is part of my job as a teacher. This is what I do for students. So there was that. It needed to be approved. And then each month you submit 40, 60, 80 pages to your thesis advisor, and they go through it and advise on plot points, on characterization, on world building, if necessary. So my advisor was Timmons Isaias, who is a science fiction and fantasy writer, and so he was very helpful in pointing out things that I was forgetting, things that I could make better. Every time I used a colon, I got a big black mark because he doesn't like colons. So that's part of the process, is also critiquing with a couple of other writers in the program that I teach in, and the one where I got my thesis. You give those pages to your critique partners, and they brainstorm and workshop them as well. So you're getting feedback from other writers as you move through the process, which normally is not part of my process. I do it all myself, and then at the end I give it to my 2 trusted beta readers, and then they give me feedback. So doing it as a master's thesis is more collaborative, more iterative, and more supervised. And that's not a bad thing, because I had 7 or 8 novels out by then, so I kind of knew what I was doing, but I wasn't into sharing what I was doing until it was published. So that feedback process is really good. So this program is actually open to international students. We've had students from Austria, from Russia, from Canada. So, you know, think about it.
Well,
yeah, tempting. Whether I sign, want.
There's someone on the questions saying Hufflepuffs.
Oh, yeah.
The
Open
Badgers.
the can of worms. Open the can of worms. Yes,
We don't have a Gryffindor representative here. Where are they?
Well, they get all the press anyway.
Exactly.
I'm going to make a vague attempt towards responsibility and remind Diana that we are running out of time. So I'm going to ask one final question before the end question, which Diana can make.
Okay.
One of the Annas, Anna R, is asking, what's the most important thing you've learned as a writer with love some advice?
The most important thing, other than do your outline first, is don't be afraid to be yourself on the page. I found that I got the most messed up when I wasn't willing to write honestly, because the things that are really, really important to you, you may think nobody else cares, but on the contrary, the specific becomes the universal very easily in fiction. And if there is something that's really important to you, it's probably really important to a lot of people, and don't be afraid to explore it in your fiction. That's the biggest thing I learned, and that's what I would tell any writer starting out. Don't be afraid.
Thank you. And now our last question. It's a very serious question we make to everyone. It's cats or dogs?
Cats, no question.
Hooray! You've won.
Well, and that is all for today. Time sure flies, and we have seemed to run out of it. Actually, we've seemed to run long past it, but okay, don't tell anyone. We would like to thank Shelley Adina for her time. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun, and thank you to all the readers that came to join us.
Yes, feel free to come and spend more time with us. We'd love to have you. And also thank you to all of you watching. If you're planning on attending the EuroSteamCon Portugal, we look forward to seeing you there. And if you're enjoying the road to EuroSteamCon, we also look forward to seeing you on the next step. We'll reveal the guest and date soon.
E é tudo por hoje. Queremos agradecer à Shelley pelo seu tempo, bem como a quem assistiu a este Hangout. Em relação ao EuroSteamCon, podemos informar que já selecionamos os autores participantes para o Almanac e entraremos em contacto com eles em breve. A lista final dos escolhidos será revelada também, em breve. Até lá, esperamos ver-vos no próximo Hangout, que também será revelado em breve. Obrigada and goodbye!
Bye!
Bye!